The first tow truck disappeared through the gates of Silver Ridge Estates at 5:47 in the morning. By 6:15, 3 more were behind it. And at exactly 6:38, Vanessa Whitmore, the HOA president who had ordered 11 vehicles removed from my private property while I slept, came running barefoot into the street in a silk robe, screaming at a sheriff's deputy. "You can't take those trucks. Those belong to the association." I stood across the road beside my pickup, holding a paper cup of coffee. For the first time in 6 months, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Deputy Marcus Hale glanced down at the court order in his hand. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle." Vanessa's face went pale. Behind her, the HOA maintenance yard looked like somebody had kicked over an anthill. Drivers were shouting. Security guards were making phone calls. 2 board members stood beside the clubhouse, arguing with a towing supervisor, while another deputy photographed license plates. One by one, the vehicles Vanessa had used to intimidate property owners were being loaded onto flatbeds. 3 maintenance pickups, 2 security SUVs, a landscaping truck, a utility van, and the black Chevrolet Tahoe Vanessa liked to drive around the neighborhood with magnetic signs reading Silver Ridge Community Enforcement slapped across both doors. She pointed directly at me. "This is retaliation." I finally took a sip of coffee. "No, Vanessa." My voice came out calmer than I expected. "This is paperwork." Her eyes narrowed. "You think this is funny?" "Not particularly." I reached into my jacket and pulled out 11 yellow towing receipts. But I imagine my employees didn't think it was funny when they showed up for work at 5 this morning and discovered every company vehicle missing. That stopped her. For half a second, the anger vanished from her face. Then she smiled. It was the same little smile she had given me 3 days earlier, when she warned me that Silver Ridge would enforce community standards whether I cooperated or not. "You should have read the notices," she said. I did. "Then you knew those vehicles were in violation. They were parked on my land. Your property borders Silver Ridge." "Borders?" I stepped closer. "It doesn't belong to Silver Ridge." Her jaw tightened. "You're going to regret this." Deputy Hale immediately looked up. "Ma'am, I'd be careful with statements like that." Vanessa turned toward him. "I'm president of this association. Those vehicles are essential HOA property. And these," Hale said, raising the documents, "are valid seizure orders." Vanessa stared at the papers. I watched the exact moment she realized something was different. This wasn't me arguing with her at a board meeting. This wasn't another certified letter she could ignore. This wasn't one of her private security guards blocking my driveway. A judge had signed those documents, and the deputies executing them weren't interested in her title. A tow operator hooked a cable beneath Vanessa's Tahoe. She rushed forward. "Stop." Hale stepped between them. "Back up. You don't understand what he's doing." "I understand exactly what's happening." "No, you don't." Her voice cracked. She pointed at me again. "Ask him why he had those vehicles on that property." That sentence changed everything. I lowered my coffee. Because Vanessa had just admitted something she absolutely should not have known. Hale noticed it too. His expression hardened. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said slowly, "how did you know where those vehicles were parked?" Silence. Vanessa froze. One of the HOA board members stopped talking. Even the towing supervisor looked over. I reached into my truck and picked up the folder my attorney had given me less than an hour earlier. Inside were photographs, emails, DPS records, and one document showing that what happened overnight wasn't simply an illegal tow. Someone had planned it weeks in advance. I looked directly at Vanessa. "You might want to call your attorney." Her lips parted. "Why?" I opened the folder. "Because the 11 vehicles were only the beginning. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 53 years old, and I own Mercer Equipment and Restoration, a small excavation and property restoration company outside Fort Collins, Colorado. I'm not the kind of man who goes looking for fights. Most mornings, I'm on my property before sunrise, checking equipment with coffee in one hand and a clipboard in the other. The land itself means more to me than the business. My father bought those 18 acres in 1989, back when the eastern edge of Fort Collins was mostly fields, gravel roads, and open sky. I grew up there. I learned to drive in his old Ford pickup on the dirt lane behind our barn. When he died, the property passed to me. I could have sold it years ago. I never considered it. My house sat toward the western side of the acreage. Behind it were a workshop, a steel equipment building, and a large gravel lot where my employees parked our company vehicles overnight. That arrangement had worked perfectly for years. Then Silver Ridge Estates appeared. The development went up along my eastern boundary. Expensive homes, decorative stone entrances, landscaped sidewalks, and eventually an HOA that seemed unusually interested in everything happening beyond its own fence. That was how I first met Vanessa Whitmore. The initial letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Notice of visual compliance concern. According to Silver Ridge, my equipment yard contained vehicles that were inconsistent with neighborhood appearance standards. I actually laughed. Then I checked my deed. My property wasn't part of Silver Ridge. Never had been. I mailed the notice back with a polite response explaining exactly that. 2 weeks later, another arrived. This one demanded that I install privacy screening around my gravel lot. I ignored it. Then came complaints about work lights, truck noise, equipment storage. Vanessa eventually appeared at my gate herself. She wore sunglasses and carried a leather folder against her chest. Mr. Mercer, that's me. I think we should find a cooperative solution. There's nothing to solve. Her smile tightened. Your commercial activity affects our residents. My business was here before your residence. That doesn't mean circumstances can't change. I stared at her. Are you asking me to move? I'm asking you to respect the community. This is my property, Vanessa. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she looked past me toward the gravel lot. 11 vehicles were parked there. Work pickups, service trucks, and 2 utility vans. Her eyes moved slowly across every one of them. She closed her folder. You should reconsider your position. Then she walked away. 3 nights later, at 2:13 in the morning, my security camera sent a motion alert to my phone. I was asleep and didn't see it. At 4:52, my foreman, Luis Ramirez, called me. Daniel, get outside. Something in his voice made me sit straight up. What happened? There was a pause. Then Luis said 4 words that made my stomach drop. The whole lot's empty. I was outside before Luis finished explaining. The gravel lot looked wrong. Not quiet. Not empty. Wrong. 11 dark rectangles marked where tires had rested only hours earlier. Fresh drag marks cut across the gravel toward my front gate. Luis stood beside the workshop in a grey sweatshirt, staring at the damage. They took everything. Every company vehicle. I pulled out my phone and opened the security footage. At 2:13 a.m., the first tow truck entered through my gate. Then another. Then another. 6 men in reflective jackets moved across my property with flashlights. A black Tahoe stopped near the entrance. I zoomed in. Silver Ridge Community Enforcement. You've got to be kidding me. At 6:05, I drove straight to the Silver Ridge clubhouse. Vanessa was already there. That bothered me more than anything. She stood beside the entrance wearing a camel-colored coat, speaking with 2 men from the HOA board. When she saw my truck, she didn't look surprised. She looked prepared. I got out holding my phone. Where are my vehicles? Vanessa folded her arms. Good morning, Daniel. 11 vehicles disappeared from my property. Where are they? They were removed. By you? By a licensed towing contractor acting on behalf of Silver Ridge. I stared at her. You sent tow trucks onto private property at 2 in the morning. They were enforcing violations. Your HOA has no authority over my land. One board member, Richard Coleman, shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa remained perfectly still. We disagree. Then show me the document giving you authority. She opened her folder and handed me a notice. Across the top were the words, Emergency Nuisance Abatement Authorized. I read it twice. It claimed my vehicles had been stored inside an HOA-controlled visual buffer and access corridor. I almost laughed. There is no HOA corridor on my property. Our records indicate otherwise. Your records are wrong. Then challenge them through the appropriate process. You mean after you steal 11 trucks? Vanessa stepped closer. Choose your words carefully. A sheriff's cruiser turned into the parking lot. Vanessa's expression immediately changed. Deputy Marcus Hale stepped out. I knew Marcus casually from county meetings and local business events, but I had never needed him professionally. Until now. Vanessa reached him first. Deputy, this gentleman is becoming aggressive. Marcus looked at me. I held out my phone. My vehicles were removed from behind my locked property line overnight. Locked? The chain was cut. That got his attention. Vanessa interrupted. The HOA had legal authorization. Marcus turned toward her. Authorization from whom? Our council. That's not what I asked. For the first time, Vanessa hesitated. Marcus examined the document. This isn't a court order. It doesn't need to be. That depends on what you did. He asked for the towing company's information. Vanessa refused at first, claiming it was an internal enforcement matter. Marcus's tone hardened. 11 vehicles are missing. Give me the company name. She finally did. Front Range Recovery Services. I called immediately. A dispatcher answered. I'm looking for 11 vehicles removed from Mercer equipment. Keyboard clicks. Then silence. Sir, those vehicles aren't at our primary yard. Where are they? I'm not authorized to release that. Who is? Another pause. The contracting party. I looked at Vanessa. She was watching me, smiling. Marcus took the phone. This is Deputy Hale with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. I need the storage location. The dispatcher's voice became quieter. Deputy, the account has a restriction. What restriction? No vehicle can be released without written authorization from Silver Ridge HOA. My hands curled into fists. Then Marcus asked the question that cracked the entire situation open. Who signed the tow authorization? The dispatcher answered. Vanessa Whitmore. Marcus slowly lowered the phone, but the dispatcher wasn't finished. There's also a standing order on the account. Marcus frowned. What standing order? To remove any Mercer equipment vehicle found within the designated zone. I looked at Vanessa. This wasn't an overnight decision. It was a campaign. And whatever Silver Ridge had planned, they weren't finished. By 8 that morning, I was sitting across from Rebecca Sloan, the attorney who had handled my father's estate and every property issue I'd had since. Rebecca didn't waste time. Start from the first letter. I placed everything on her conference table. The HOA notices, photographs, towing authorization, security footage, and the so-called emergency nuisance document. She read silently for several minutes. Then she circled one phrase, HOA-controlled visual buffer and access corridor. That corridor doesn't exist. Maybe not legally, she said, but somebody wants people to believe it does. Rebecca pulled up the Larimer County property database. My parcel appeared on the screen. 18 acres. Mercer ownership. No HOA membership. No recorded covenant granting Silver Ridge control over my equipment lot. Rebecca leaned back. So where did they get this? That question sent us to the county recorder. An hour later, we were sitting beside a clerk named Ellen Brooks while she searched historical filings. The original Silver Ridge development plat appeared first, then amendments, utility easements, drainage agreements. Nothing touched my vehicle lot until Ellen stopped scrolling. That's strange. She opened a document recorded only 7 weeks earlier. Supplemental access and aesthetic buffer agreement. My name appeared at the bottom. Daniel Mercer. I stared at the signature. That isn't mine. Rebecca looked at me. You're certain? I've never seen this document. According to the agreement, I had voluntarily granted Silver Ridge limited enforcement authority over a 60-foot strip running along my eastern property line. The gravel lot sat partly inside that strip. There was just one problem. My signature had been notarized on May 14. I was in Kansas that entire week, supervising tornado restoration work. I pulled up photographs from the job site, time-stamped. May 14. Rebecca's expression changed. Get me everything proving you were there. We kept digging. The agreement listed its preparer as Silver Ridge HOA. The notary was a woman named Melissa Crane. The submitting party was Richard Coleman, the same board member who had stood beside Vanessa that morning. Then Ellen found something else. A correction request filed 3 days after the agreement. The request asked the recorder's office to replace an attached survey because of a clerical boundary error. Rebecca compared the original survey with the replacement. The first showed the buffer ending at my property line. The replacement pushed it 60 feet onto my land. Nobody spoke for several seconds. This wasn't a mistake, I said. Rebecca nodded. No. My phone rang. Luis, I answered. Daniel, someone's at the yard. Who? Silver Ridge Security. 3 guys. I stood immediately. What are they doing? Putting up signs. What signs? Luis went silent. Then he read one aloud. HOA-controlled access area. Unauthorized vehicles, subject to tow. Rebecca was already gathering the documents. Tell Luis not to touch anything. Why? Because now, we let them create evidence. Then Ellen called us back toward her computer. She had opened the metadata attached to the replacement survey. Rebecca, she said quietly, you need to see who uploaded this. The account belonged to Silver Ridge, but the contact email wasn't Richard's. It was Vanessa Whitmore's personal HOA account. Rebecca stared at the screen, and beneath the upload record was a note Vanessa apparently never expected anyone outside the recorder's office to read. Revised boundary attached per president's instruction. Prior version must not be used. Rebecca photographed the screen. Then she looked at me. Daniel, this stopped being a towing dispute. I felt my stomach tighten. What is it now? She closed the file. Potential fraud. Rebecca moved fast. By noon, she had sent preservation notices to Silver Ridge, Front Range Recovery Services, the survey company named on the altered map, and Melissa Crane, the notary whose stamp appeared beneath my forged signature. At 1:17, Melissa called. Rebecca put her on speaker. I never notarized Daniel Mercer's signature. The room went silent. Rebecca leaned toward the phone. Your stamp appears on the agreement. I know. Vanessa had copies of documents I notarized for the HOA last year, but I did not witness Mr. Mercer sign anything. Did you authorize anyone to use your stamp? Absolutely not. There it was. But the real smoking gun arrived 20 minutes later. Front Range Recovery's attorney apparently decided 11 questionable tows weren't worth protecting an HOA client. He emailed Rebecca the complete work order. It had been created 3 weeks earlier. Not overnight. Not after some emergency complaint. 3 weeks. Attached was an email chain between Vanessa, Richard Coleman, and the towing company. Rebecca read one sentence twice. Then she turned the laptop toward me. Once Mercer's vehicles are removed, continued storage fees should create enough operational pressure to force compliance. Do not release without HOA authorization. Sender, Vanessa Whitmore. My jaw tightened. She wanted to cripple my business. Rebecca kept scrolling. The next message was worse. Richard had asked whether they actually possessed recorded authority over my lot. Vanessa replied, the revised filing will cover us. By the time Mercer challenges it, the enforcement action will already be complete. Rebecca stared at me. That's intent. My phone vibrated. Luis again. This time he sounded furious. You need to get back here. What happened? They blocked the driveway. We reached my property 15 minutes later. 2 Silver Ridge security SUVs were parked across the entrance. Bright orange barriers stood behind them. Vanessa was there with a local television reporter. Of course she was. The moment I stepped from Rebecca's car, a camera turned toward me. Vanessa spoke loudly. Mr. Mercer has repeatedly refused reasonable community safety requirements. Rebecca whispered, don't engage. But Vanessa wanted a scene. She held up photographs of my trucks. This commercial operation has endangered residents for months. I looked at the reporter. Would you like to see the county deed? Vanessa's face tightened. Rebecca stepped forward. And would you like to see the document Silver Ridge recorded with Mr. Mercer's forged signature? Everything stopped. Richard, standing near one SUV, went pale. Vanessa recovered quickly. That is a defamatory accusation. Rebecca smiled slightly. Excellent, then you won't object to preserving your emails. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward Richard. That tiny movement told me more than any speech could have. Deputy Hale arrived minutes later with another cruiser. Rebecca handed him copies of the filings, Melissa's written statement, and the towing emails. Marcus read them beside his patrol car. Then he looked toward Vanessa. Remove the barriers. She folded her arms. I'm acting under HOA authority, not on this property. My counsel, remove them now. The security guards obeyed. Vanessa didn't. She walked toward me until Rebecca stepped between us. You think you've won? Vanessa whispered. I looked past her at the empty spaces where my 11 vehicles had been. No. I held up the email chain. I think you finally gave us enough evidence to start. That afternoon, Rebecca filed for emergency relief. By 4:40, a judge ordered my vehicles released without storage fees and temporarily prohibited Silver Ridge from entering or enforcing anything on my property. Then Rebecca made a second request, a prejudgment seizure order covering HOA-owned vehicles, potentially tied to damages and the disputed enforcement operation. At 5:31 the next morning, my phone rang. Rebecca had only 6 words for me. The judge signed it. Get dressed. By sunrise, tow trucks were already rolling toward Silver Ridge. 3 weeks later, I walked into the Larimer County Courthouse, carrying the same yellow towing receipts I'd held that morning outside Silver Ridge. Only now, they were exhibits. Vanessa sat at the opposite table beside 2 attorneys. Richard Coleman sat several feet behind her. He wouldn't look at her. That caught my attention immediately. Judge Caroline Hayes entered at 9 sharp. Rebecca stood. Your Honor, this case began with 11 vehicles being removed from private land. But the towing itself depended on something more serious, a recorded agreement my client never signed. Silver Ridge's attorney Thomas Keller rose. The association relied in good faith on a facially valid recorded instrument. Rebecca turned toward him. Good faith? She displayed Vanessa's email. The revised filing will cover us. Keller objected. The judge overruled him. Rebecca called me first. I explained the property history, the HOA letters, Vanessa's warnings, and the morning I found 11 vehicles gone. Did you ever sign the supplemental access and aesthetic buffer agreement? No. You in Colorado when it was supposedly notarized? No. Rebecca displayed photographs from Kansas, hotel records, fuel receipts, and company time logs. Keller tried another angle during cross-examination. Mr. Mercer, your business vehicles were visible from Silver Ridge Homes, correct? Yes. And residents complained? I assume so. So the association had legitimate concerns. I looked at him. A complaint doesn't transfer ownership. Nobody in the courtroom moved. Next came Melissa Crane. She testified that the notary stamp was hers, but the notarization wasn't. I never met Mr. Mercer on May 14th, she said. I never watched him sign that document. Judge Hayes leaned forward. Are you alleging your notarial credentials were copied? Yes, Your Honor. Then Rebecca called Richard. Vanessa finally turned around. Richard avoided her eyes. His confidence disappeared quickly. Rebecca showed him the original survey. Where does the buffer end? At Mr. Mercer's boundary. Then she displayed the replacement. And here? Richard swallowed. Approximately 60 feet inside. Who instructed you to submit the replacement? Silence. Keller objected. Overruled. Rebecca repeated the question. Richard looked toward Vanessa. She stared straight ahead. Mrs. Whitmore. A murmur moved through the gallery. Rebecca displayed another email. Did you ask Mrs. Whitmore whether the HOA actually possessed authority over Mr. Mercer's lot? Yes. And what did she tell you? Richard's shoulders dropped. She said the revised filing would handle it. Vanessa whispered something sharply to Keller. Then Rebecca produced the towing company email. The courtroom became completely still as she read Vanessa's instruction about using storage fees to create operational pressure. Judge Hayes removed her glasses. Mrs. Whitmore's counsel, are you disputing the authenticity of these emails? Keller stood slowly. We dispute their interpretation. The judge's expression hardened. I didn't ask about interpretation. Keller paused. No, Your Honor. Then came the surprise. Rebecca called the manager of Front Range Recovery. He testified that Vanessa had personally provided the property map and demanded nighttime removal. Rebecca asked one final question. Did Mrs. Whitmore say why the vehicles had to be removed overnight? The manager glanced toward Vanessa. Yes. What did she say? He took a breath. She said if Mercer was awake, he'd stop us because he knew we didn't have the right to be there. Vanessa shot to her feet. That is a lie. Judge Hayes slammed the gavel. Mrs. Whitmore, sit down. But now. Vanessa slowly lowered herself into her chair. But her noticed. The judge looked through the exhibits for nearly a minute. Then she closed the folder. I have heard enough. My heartbeat hammered against my ribs. Judge Hayes looked first at Vanessa, then at me. I'm prepared to rule. And suddenly, the courtroom became so quiet, I could hear the clock above the door. Judge Hayes kept both hands on the closed folder. The evidence establishes something considerably more serious than an aggressive homeowners association exceeding its boundaries. Vanessa sat perfectly still. The judge continued. Mr. Mercer did not execute the supplemental access and aesthetic buffer agreement. The notarization supporting that instrument has been credibly denied by the notary whose credentials appear upon it. The replacement survey expanded the claimed enforcement area onto Mr. Mercer's property without his consent. She paused. And the defendants proceeded with enforcement despite internal communications questioning whether they possessed lawful authority. Vanessa leaned toward Keller. He whispered something back, but Judge Hayes wasn't finished. The court therefore declares the purported agreement invalid and unenforceable. I felt Rebecca's hand briefly touch my arm. The court further finds Silver Ridge had no lawful authority to remove Mr. Mercer's 11 vehicles. Behind us, somebody exhaled loudly. Judge Hayes ordered Silver Ridge responsible for the towing expenses, lost business income, property damage, legal fees, and other damages established through the proceedings. Then she addressed the HOA fleet. The prejudgment seizure was extraordinary, but given the evidence available when the emergency petition was presented, the court finds the temporary order was properly issued. Vanessa's attorney stood. Your Honor, may we request immediate release of the association vehicles? Not today. Vanessa closed her eyes. Judge Hayes then looked toward the county investigator sitting near the back. The evidence concerning the recorded instrument, notarial credentials and related communications will remain available to appropriate authorities for any separate investigation they consider warranted. That changed the room. This wasn't just about money anymore. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. I wanted no victory speech. Rebecca handled most of the questions. I gave one answer. My employees came to work and found 11 vehicles missing because somebody believed an HOA title gave them authority over property they didn't own. It didn't. Within days, Silver Ridge held an emergency board meeting. Vanessa resigned before it began. Richard resigned that evening. The HOA's management company announced an independent review of enforcement practices and recorded property documents. Front Range Recovery returned every one of my vehicles without charging us $1. 3 had damaged suspension components. 1 pickup had a scratched door. But when Luis saw the trucks rolling back through my gate, he stood beside me with his hands on his hips. Never thought I'd be emotional about seeing a utility van. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Don't hug it. No promises. The criminal investigation into the altered filing continued separately. I stayed out of speculation and let the records speak for themselves. What mattered to me was simpler. The false agreement was gone. The claimed buffer was gone. Silver Ridge's signs disappeared from my fence line, and nobody from the HOA could enter my property without permission. A month later, I received a letter from several Silver Ridge homeowners. I expected another complaint. Instead, they apologized. They wrote that most residents had never known what Vanessa was doing in their name. That surprised me. It also reminded me that an HOA wasn't a single person. The problem had never been every homeowner behind those gates. It was what happened when authority stopped being questioned. One evening, Luis and I stood near the gravel lot as the sun dropped behind the foothills. All 11 vehicles were parked where they belonged. He nodded toward them. So was impounding their whole fleet worth waking up before sunrise? I smiled. It wasn't about their fleet. Then what was it about? I looked toward the property line my father had protected for decades, making sure they finally understood where their authority ended. 6 months later, the gravel lot behind my workshop looked almost exactly the way it had before Silver Ridge entered my life. Almost. The 11 company vehicles were still parked in their usual places every evening. Luis still arrived before most people were awake. I still drank my first cup of coffee beside the equipment building, while the Colorado sky turned orange above the foothills. But one thing had changed. Near the eastern property line, I installed a simple sign: Mercer Private Property. No HOA authority beyond this point. Luis laughed the first time he saw it. Subtle. I considered something bigger. Please don't. Silver Ridge changed too. The new board formally withdrew every violation notice ever issued against my property. They hired outside counsel to review their boundaries and adopted rules requiring documented ownership or recorded authority before any future enforcement action involving neighboring land. Most importantly, they stopped treating my property line like a suggestion. The experience taught me something I wish more homeowners understood. Official-looking paperwork isn't automatically legitimate. A confident person holding a clipboard doesn't automatically have authority. And when someone tells you that you have no choice, sometimes the most important question you can ask is, show me where it says you have the right. My father spent decades protecting this land. In the end, protecting it myself didn't require shouting louder than Vanessa. It required records, evidence, patience, and refusing to surrender simply because someone expected me to be intimidated. If you've ever dealt with an HOA that crossed the line, tell me what happened in the comments. And here's the question I want to leave you with. If you woke up and discovered an HOA had towed 11 vehicles from your private property, what would you have done first? If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more property disputes, HOA battles, courtroom showdowns, and stories where the paperwork finally catches up with the people who thought the rules didn't apply to them. Thanks for spending this time with me. Protect what belongs to you. Know where the boundaries are. And never confuse someone's confidence with their legal authority.